yesterday, Christy Dobbs Wendell's wife, her mother passed away, and Phyllis Goad, and she was in her 70s. But she struggled the last couple of years, especially right after COVID. There was a time there when they didn't think she was going to make it. And she pulled through and got a couple more years done. But they've been married for 61 years, and a good testimony. So they won't know till tomorrow what the arrangements are. But if we would you could just pray for her, and you get a chance to reach out to her, let her know you're praying. I'm sure she'd appreciate that. Also wanted Kathleen wanted me to mention the first 3 Sundays of the month. The last Sunday they won't be doing it because it's youth night, and Kathleen's over there. But the first 3 Sundays of the month, the ladies are going to get together and go to the jail. And then, of course, Gabe and I will also go, and any of the guys that want to go or be a part of that, if you just see Tater, he can help you fill out the paperwork. But we'll be going over there this evening as well. It was nice to see. I think we had 3 families with their kids here today. Guys that recently got out of jail. And I tell you what, it is something to see them in church with their kids, right? Because, they're from this community. Everybody, I walk in there, and I'm the only one that doesn't know somebody in jail, right? Everybody else is it's like a high school reunion in there. Sean knows people he went to school with, and and it's like, well, just because it's people from the community, right? And when they get out, they just need need prayer. Pray for Ringo. Ringo's looking for a job. Part of the things that they have to do is they have to have a job in order to keep up with parole. So if they don't get a job, then it causes them, and it's difficult when you got to write down your past on a job application, right? He's a carpenter, and if you guys have any ideas, or somebody we're trying, I'm getting his name out there. But you pray for Ringo that he's looking for a job and needs to get one. And then of course, then it's the driving thing. Then oftentimes, you got to work to get your license back, right? And he really wants to work. He just needs that opportunity, right? So I just pray that God will open doors for that. And then Paul's Bible study on Friday. If you would like to, Kathleen is going to help make sure that we have a little meal provided. If you'd like to help her, she had a couple people respond to that. Just let her know. And the next Sunday is our fellowship church Sunday. Looking forward to just having a time and a meal together and an early service. We're not going to cancel. We'll just move it up that day, and hopefully people can eat together and then have another service. And so you pray for that. And I think that's all the announcements I have. And of course, youth service will be on us really quick again. February's a shorter month. Yes, Miss Sandy. Yeah. Yeah. When is the next soup kitchen? This coming Saturday. It's not our church. Do they? Yeah. Okay, and they have enough food for that? Okay. All right. I know Creston reached out to me from after the funeral for Danny and wanted me to make sure that you guys know that he thoroughly appreciated the love that this church showed their family, and appreciated all the efforts in the food and that. Wanted me to make sure that I told you guys thank you for that. And I think that's all the announcements we have, Brother Ron.
All right, if you'd please stand and get a hymn book and turn to hymn 179, our Brother Dickens will come forth to receive an offering. Brother Arnold, would you ask a blessing on offering, please?
Heavenly Father, that we might truly worship you
Amen.
I know I sang this song last week, and for two reasons, I'm going to sing it again. One, I can't find my book. But the other one is that whenever I was thinking of songs all day today, this one, God just wouldn't, it wouldn't leave my mind, so. I've been held by the Savior. I fell far from above, but I've been down to the river. I ain't the same, a prodigal returned, and all my hope is in Jesus. Thank God my yesterday's gone. All my sins are forgiven. I've been washed by the blood. I'm no stranger to the prison. I've worn shackles and chains, but I've been freed and forgiven. I ain't going back, I'll never be the same. That's why I sing, 'cause all my hope is in Jesus. Thank God my yesterday's gone. All my sins are forgiven. I've been washed by the blood. There's the kind of thing that just breaks me down. It breaks me down to my knees. But I've been broken more than a time or two. But then he picks me up and shows me the way. That's why I sing, 'cause all my hope is in Jesus. Thank God my yesterday's gone. All my sins are forgiven. I've been washed by, I've been washed by, I've been washed by the blood.
All right, well, thank you guys for coming out on a die-hard night. This is Super Bowl night, but brother, your wife, Brother Ronnie, said that you wouldn't even know who's playing, and I'm probably right there. But you know, I told you this before when I was in New Orleans, and the Steelers were playing. Man, I tell you what, that was a hard group of people. When they were in the Super Bowl, they wanted me so bad to move the service. I said, no way. I'd do that, and that'd be the night the Lord come back. I'm like, I'm not going down like that, right? Thank you for coming out tonight. If you have your Bibles with you, if you go to Judges chapter 7, Father, thank you for this evening, and thank you for, Father, just being able to be back in your house tonight, just to get around your word a little bit. And Lord, I pray that you would help us. Lord, as we just kind of look into the week ahead, and Lord, there's just so many aspects to the Christian life, and service is one of them. Commitment's one of those, and Lord, I just pray as we look at that tonight that you would burden our heart. We love you. We ask this in your precious name. Amen. You know, I was, because there were today about caused a few people to have a heart attack, because when I said Noah, there were literally 3 Noahs back there. There's 2 in Paul's family, and then right behind them, Brother Robert Mason, he has a Noah. Well, that Noah thought I was talking to him and about passed out, right? And I forgot there was 3 Noahs. But a few weeks ago, and because there's too many Noahs, I didn't know which one he was talking about. I didn't know it was the one that got in the accident or the other one. So he told me that Noah had started a Bible study at his home at 3 o'clock on Sunday. And then a couple weeks ago, he was going to go down and do some street preaching. And then this week, I get that text, at 11 o'clock at night. Of course, I had the wrong Noah in my mind as who it was. And you just got thinking about that. Got thinking about seeing that happen to other people. About how does a young man go? No adult told him to do it. Look, I'm sure he's not perfect, so I don't want to lift people up. But no adult told him to do that. There was no leading from any other outside source. It's just something he did on his own, right? So what I want to look at tonight is volunteerism, and really what the Bible says about that. And that was just an easy example. What is that word in during Vietnam? You had these people, they called them conscientious objectors. It's very difficult to go into battle with a conscientious objector, right? You can see it politically, whatever your side you're on. When one side gets in, they go through there. And I think Trump probably learned his lesson the first go around. So what you see him doing this go around, you see him looking at everybody around him, and what he's doing is like, I don't want you here unless you're on my team, right? Because too hard to fight all of that, right? I mean, and so when you look at God, we know that and we're going to look at this verse here in a minute, we know that he said, as he saw the multitudes and he had compassion, he said these words, pray that the Lord of the harvest would send forth laborers. And that's kind of like a volunteer cry, right? We know that he said that, and so he's seeing this big multitude. He sees that there's a need, and he says, pray to your Father in heaven that he would send forth laborers into his harvest. So it really doesn't really work to arm wrestle somebody into doing it, because you want them to be there because they want to be there. All right. So when you look at here in Judges chapter 7. And Sean spoke of this a couple months ago, Judges chapter 7. And I want you to look at verse 2. Then the Lord said unto Gideon, the people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves up against me, saying, my own hand has saved me. So he needed people in the army, but there was just so many of them. And we know that one of the reasons why he wanted to cut the army down was so that when they defeated the enemy, they wouldn't say it was by their own might. But that was one reason why. But you can't ignore what happens next, right? So he has to whittle the army down, and he says, okay, here's how I want you to do it. Now therefore go to proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people 22,000, and there remained 10,000. So they started out at 32,000, if I do the math right. And by that one simple decree, he said, look, if you're afraid, and he used this barometer, he said, and see, whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people 22,000. You know, he didn't have to say much, Sean, to let him out of that. All he said was these words: if you're fearful or afraid, and I'm thinking first off, how I was raised, that'd be the last words you would quit on, right? Because you just told everybody you're a girl, right? But, I mean, so they do this, and they're like, really? That's it? Okay, see you later, right? I mean, there was no penalty, no court martial. It was like, look, if you're afraid or you really don't want to be here, then now's your opportunity. Well, you would expect some to leave, but 20-some thousand to get out of there? So not only do I believe God wanted to get the number down so that they wouldn't boast in their own army, but I also believe, just by the way he did it here, whoever was there, whoever was going to remain, he wanted to make sure that they wanted to be there, that they believed in the mission, right? You know, it's very difficult to have laborers if they don't believe in the mission. So, to me, if you're going to cut people out, that's a good barometer. Well, let's decide first. Do you want to be here? Okay? You know, is this something that you believe in? If you're going to fight for something, you probably ought to believe in it. Now, our mandate, we know later on, would be go ye into all the world and preach the gospel. And that belongs to the local church. But it's also something that as volunteers, right? And it's a volunteer army. Okay? But as volunteers, it ought to be something that you believe in the mission. If you don't believe in the mission, it's very, very difficult to get behind it. So why did God ask, why did Jesus ask for labor? Jesus is standing there. He sees this multitude. He's moved with compassion. When he's moved for compassion, he turns around and says, will you do this? Will you pray that your heavenly Father, that he would send forth laborers into the harvest? And he talks about the harvest being great, but the laborers are few. So it's a compelling, it's not a guilt trip. It's not and he's not even necessarily coming out and asking you to do it. But if somebody says pray for laborers and you're standing there, you might be an answer to that prayer. But he only truly wants people to do that if their heart's in it. Well, the next thing that they do is they needed to come down a little bit more. You know, there were still too many. There were 10,000. And the Lord said unto Gideon, the people are yet too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will try them for thee there. And it shall be that of whom I say unto thee, this shall go with thee, the same also shall go with thee. And of whomsoever I say unto thee, this shall not go with thee, the same shall not go. So he brought them down down the people to the water. And the Lord said unto Gideon, every one that lappeth of the water with his tongue, as a dog lappeth, him shalt thou set by himself. Likewise, every one that boweth down upon his knee to drink, and a number of them that lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was about 300 men. But all the rest of the people bowed down upon their knees to drink water. Now, he could have just said, look, I only need 300 men, or however many. So pick out 300 men, let's go. Because he needed to get it down to that number. But he also wanted whoever was going to be there to not only want to be there, but to pay attention to what they're doing. So, you know, when these men came to the water, you know, the ones that were really thirsty, they just went down and stuck their head into it. And this is the way I've heard over in Sunday school, you know, since I was a kid, that the ones who brought the water up, you know, if you got your head down in the water and drinking like that, you're not paying attention to what's around you, right? So these were two good qualifications that you would want if you were going to have somebody carry out a mission for you, right? So we've got this little bit to look at. Then from there, I want you to go to Exodus chapter 35, if you'd go over there and look. Here's another example, Exodus chapter 35 and verse 5. They're raising money for the tabernacle. In 35 and verse 5, it says this. Verse 4, and Moses spake unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, this is the thing which the Lord commanded, saying, take ye from among you an offering unto the Lord. Whosoever is of a willing heart, let him bring it an offering of the Lord, gold and silver and brass. And then goes down, if you would, to verse 21. It says this, and they came everyone whose heart stirred him up, and everyone whom his spirit made willing, and they brought the Lord's offering. So he's taking up an offering, and he's saying, listen, it doesn't do any good to give, whether it's money or of yourself in God's volunteer army, if you're guilt-tripped into it, or if you're made to do it. Because God does not need to be a beggar. God does not need to be a beggar for an army for the cause that he's fighting for. Because the cause is just enough to be funded on a volunteer basis, right? I mean, shouldn't have to guilt somebody into telling somebody about Jesus. You shouldn't have to guilt somebody about giving to the mission. And what's the mission? Go into all the world and preach the gospel. So he says, we're going to take up an offering for this tabernacle, but here's the criteria. You have to be willing. And if you're not willing, if it's not something that you want to do, and not only did it say willing, it says whose heart is stirred inside of you. Now we know Isaiah was a volunteer, right? He was a volunteer. God didn't say to Isaiah, you're going. He said these words to him, who will go? But before he did that, what did he do? Isaiah got to see God in his true glory. When he did that, he then saw himself as being needy. And he said, woe is me, for I am undone. Okay? And then when he got to that point, so he realized, man, he's nothing without God, and God is everything. Isaiah's in the perfect spot to be asked this question. Who will go for me? Listen, there's still a job to do. And a church is a group of volunteers. I mean, nobody has to be here. You choose to be here. And salvation's free. And you can just sit on a pew and wait till he comes. But think about what he did. And how does somebody as kind as Jesus that asks for help, how do you tell him no? And what would he have to do to convince us from our heart willingly to be involved in whatever he needs us to be involved in? That it certainly should be a no-brainer, that it should be easy in a room full of believers that are bought by the blood of Christ. It's reasonable to think that it wouldn't be very hard to come up with a volunteer army under those conditions. What's the conditions? We've all been saved by grace. We owed a debt we couldn't pay. Christ walked up and he paid that debt for me. So if he then turned around and said, hey, Dave, I've got something for you to do, it would be sad if you walked away and thought like, well, I got no choice. He died for me, right? But it ought to be instead something that's willing. And when they were picking that army and they had to get the number down, he used a process because he wanted to make sure that whoever was left for the right reasons, and then he could use them. Same way with giving. He's like, and you know what? They had no problem. They had more money to build that tabernacle than they knew what to do with it. But he said, basically, I don't want your money unless you believe in the mission. He said, because and you go through that chapter, it says the word willing many, many times, more times than I just read to you. You can read down through there. You're going to, when I taught school, and then when I was in school, they say if you mention something 3 times, you better pay attention to it. Well, that word willingly is mentioned more than 3 times in that chapter because he wanted you to know there will be no debtors to him. I mean, he's not going to owe you anything, that's what I meant to say. Right? You owe him everything, okay? And that's the only way that he's going to take that volunteer army is it ought to be something that we want to do. It ought to be something that our heart compels us to do. Not something that we feel like we have to do, but it ought to be in the heart of every born-again believer, a desire to do something. Right? And if it's something that helps the whole mechanism of the local church move forward, then it's important. You know, and whether it's serving food or there's many things that go on in a church. There's many things that go on in spreading the gospel. Not only does it take finances, but it does take feet on the ground. You know, oftentimes you'll hear this over and over again as you get in a room full of preachers. They'll say this: 10% of the people usually lift 90% of the load. But if everybody in the room is born again, then when a plea goes out for the furtherance of the gospel, you would think that it would be flooded with people saying, hey, during World War II and World War I, there were guys that were young as 16 years old that lied on their birth certificate. People coming home in body bags like crazy. And there were young men who were told that they couldn't go because some sort of problem, and it absolutely destroyed them. They would go back home and they would try again, and they would try again, and they would try again, because they believed in the mission and they wanted to have a part of it. And wouldn't that be something if God's children treated serving God that way? And it's an absolute honor, and I hope I'm chosen, because there would be no greater thing that I can do with my life than something God asked me to do. And whether it's little or it's big, it doesn't matter if that's what God asks us to do, right? So, you know, he definitely needs people. He wants people, but there is a criteria for that. Now, I want you to go to Acts chapter 9 as we continue on with this. I was talking to Dr. Fortna, and he mentioned this. I said, I'm going to use that. Acts chapter 9. And this is about the Apostle Paul. Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus, to the synagogue. And verse 3, and as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? Down to verse, said, and he said, who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus whom thou persecutest. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, arise and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what to do. And the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. And Saul arose from the earth, and when his eyes were opened, he saw no man. So Dr. Fortin was talking to me about this. I said, Dave, think about this. God is recruiting the Apostle Paul. Now, the Apostle Paul could have still rejected him, right? He could have still did it. So he's on a recruiting mission. And you know what he does to get a recruit? He knocks him over and makes him blind, and then says, hey, you know, I want you on my team, right? And I thought, well, yeah, when he's doing this and when Jesus is confronting people, he doesn't pull any punches. Here is a new recruit. And I want you to look down in verse 15. But the Lord said unto him, go thy way, for he is a chosen, because people didn't know what to do with him. I mean, Paul's showing up and they're like, whoa, get this guy out of here, man. I mean, why'd you bring him to church? Could you imagine? The churches were hiding from the Apostle Paul. Can you imagine walking in a church service with the Apostle Paul in a house church? You open the door in this house church where people are scared to death of that man, and you show up with him. And you're like, what are you doing bringing him there? Oh, no, he's one of us now. That would be a hard sell. And it was a hard sell, right? They're like, you know who this guy is? You know, is this even safe? Why are you bringing him here? But then this is what he says. Listen to this, okay? But the Lord said unto him, go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me to bear my name. Now look at verse 16. For I will show him how great things he must suffer for my name's sake. He's saying, Paul, I need a volunteer. And this is a journey. I want you to tell him what great things he must suffer for me. And he's saying, this has got to be somebody that believes in the journey. Now, What greater thing than a man who was an enemy of the cross of Christ, who has persecuted and has knocked down the things, Sean, that he would say about Jesus? Because before this, he didn't believe Jesus was the Son of God. Do you think he talked kindly about him? Do you think if you had an apostle, if you went up and said, hey, have you heard about this new evangelist out there? His name's Jesus. Do you think Paul would have had anything nice to say about Jesus? Would you not hear, you don't think he would say things like, well, that man's a blasphemer and a hypocrite, man, we put him to death, and why are you following somebody that was an enemy of the state, and why are you, he was an enemy of Judaism, and he wanted to undo everything that we believe in, and, you wouldn't hear anything positive out of the Apostle Paul up into the road of Damascus about the Lord Jesus Christ at all, right? And then Jesus coming to that very same person and just showing him love. And then asking him this, saying, listen. And he receiving that love and saying, Paul, I need a volunteer. And it's not going to be easy. And I really can't make anybody do what I'm going to ask you to do. It needs to come from your heart. What sure way to get a yes but to save an old sinner? Just got to stick your hand up. How would you tell him no? Why would you tell him no? Is there anything truly that he could ask you? And we all think about this in theory. But is there anything that you wouldn't do? Well, that's easy because you're not more than likely going to be asked to do it. But some people are. Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son. And when you look through the Bible, that goes well. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't try to say, look, this is going to be easy, and he's going to say, no, this is going to more than likely cost you something. Same way with Peter. So after Peter denies Christ, they're sitting on the beach, and Jesus says to him, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, I love you. And he does that 3 times. And he gets frustrated, and he says, yea, Lord, I love you. Then he says this, feed my sheep. And he says, Peter, they're going to lead you where you don't want to go. They're going to tie your hand. See, Peter, you were afraid when they were tying my hands and feet. This time they're going to tie your hands and feet. And Peter, all I need to know, this is a volunteer mission. It's a volunteer mission. Do you love me? I can't make somebody go on this mission. Because if I make them go on this mission, then it goes against what the mission is. Right? This has got to come from your heart. This has got to come from a love in a relationship when the one that's asking you to do it. And he says, do you love me? Then feed my sheep. And he said, he doesn't pull any punches there. He turns around and says, Peter, are you sure? Because this is what you're getting into. Are you sure? And can you imagine Peter saying, see, he went AWOL. Should have been court-martialed. He was already on the team. And he went missing. Thankful for the grace of God. It comes back to an AWOL soldier who had gone missing. Yeah, and people would say, now why in the world are you going to trust him? Why would you do that after what he did? Right? So he's saying, well, guys, you wouldn't want, I don't know if you want his mission, because the mission he's getting, tough mission, right? And I tell you what, I'm so thankful for that, but you know what drove Peter forward? Should we thank the Lord for second chances and a desire to be a part of something. And guys, the work out there it would take, I was thinking about in India this month, there is a religious event and they're expecting 430 million people to show up. That's not even close to the population of India. That is just the people that are coming to this religious event that's lasting 45 days. Could you imagine just a sheer volume of trying to reach 430 million people? Do you think the harvest is still plentiful? Do you think, Sean, the laborers are still few? Do you think Jesus would today still ask for laborers?
Man.
Do you think it would still be something? And it ought to be the point where that we're not waiting on him to ask us to do it. It ought to be more like that it would be in our heart to say, how about I just go volunteer now? What would be wrong with just going to God now and saying, hey, I want you to know I am of a willing heart. I want you to know that however you can use me, whatever you would use me, whatever, in a body of believers, if there's really truly something to do and volunteers are needed, there ought to be so many hands that go up that they have to say, do you know what they ended up doing? Do you know what Moses had to tell the people that were bringing the offering? Now, can you imagine this, Brother Arnold, in a Baptist church today, where they say, quit bringing money. We have too much. Stop. Right? Not in my lifetime, I haven't seen it, right? Where they turn around, that's exactly what happened. Why? Because they went after the right people. What were the people? The willing people. Well, the willing people, man, they gave. And then he had to say, hey, we have enough. Save it for another day. Well, that's the way it ought to be in the house of the Lord when it comes to volunteers for his work. There ought to be so many volunteers that he has to say, you guys can stop volunteering for a little bit. We're overloaded. We got an army that can run. I'll tell you what, you guys hold on to that, and when some of these get beat up a little bit, we'll get some replacements later on. Thank you for your service. Wouldn't that be great if he looked down from heaven and was able to say that? A couple weeks ago I mentioned, when Jesus was going and walking, and he turns around and there's a multitude behind him. And he says, I think, here, let me read this to you. Go to Luke chapter 10. Let me see really quick if that's it. Let's see here. Let's see if that's it or not. Down in verse chapter 9 and verse, it's not chapter 10, chapter 9 and verse 57. It came to pass as they went in the way, a certain man said unto him, Lord, I will follow thee whithersoever goest. And Jesus said unto him, foxes have holes, and the bird of the air have nests, but the Son of Man have nowhere to lay his head. Then he go down to chapter 10, and he sends out his disciples. Therefore he said unto them, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he would send forth laborers into his harvest. Go your ways, behold, I send you forth as lambs among wolves. Now, if you read the other account of it in the gospel, it says, look, they are going to persecute you. They're going to beat you. They're going to arrest you. And it even says this in the other account in the gospel, the same story. It says they're going to scourge you. So he's actually talking about some of the very same things that are offering him. He's trying to get people to go out. There's 70 now that are going. Some of them, when they found out what was involved, they bailed. When it came down to the 70, right before he sent them out one more time, he said, listen, before you go, understand the mission. You're going out there like lamb in front of wolves. And then in the other account of the gospel, he says, you're going to be persecuted. You're going to be arrested. You're going to be scourged. That's not something you would necessarily say if you're trying to get volunteers. People say that sometimes. I remember I had a dentist in my church, and we were going to Haiti. And, if you look at the State Department list for Haiti or Honduras, it's actually a scary thing. Now today, you couldn't go to Haiti at all. But back then, you could still do that. So I got about 20 people up in that room, and I'm trying to get them to go on this mission trip. So I turn it over to the dentist. He gets up there, and the words out of his mouth was this: every disease known to man you can find in Haiti. And I'm like, That's not helping, right? I don't know if we should tell him all of that, right? And he's up there, and they were bailing off of that trip like crazy. I said, Doc, he said, man, we're down to just a few. I said, well, what did you think was going to happen when you got up there and told them they were going to die doing it? Yeah, that's going to like cut the volunteer thing down really fast, right? Then when I'm over in Pakistan, I sent back that I shouldn't have said that word. When I was overseas, I sent back that picture of having a guard there. Well, I just asked somebody, on this, where I was preaching on Friday, I said, you want to go to that place with me? And he said, now, why would I do that if you had to have a guard everywhere you went? And I thought, well, that's probably not really good. That's probably not really good PR. But why would Jesus do that? Because he doesn't want you unless you want to. So he's not afraid of telling you the truth.
Amen.
He doesn't need to sugarcoat it. Because really, honestly, guys, could there be anything? Now, I know because I believe that there's good people in this church. And I would honestly believe that if we could put Jesus here right now and he were to say, here's something we got going on this week. Do we have any volunteers? I guarantee you, including my hand, there would be people tripping over that, right? But he is here. The mission of the church isn't our mission, it's his mission. He left that command when he went home. Right? But it's got to be a volunteer army. It's got to come from here. And I guess the question to ask is this. If there is a lack of urgency, if there's a lack of feeling the same compassion Jesus felt when he saw the multitude, if it doesn't move us to ask the question why. Why doesn't it? What did he see that day that we don't see? Why was he moved with compassion that day and we can't be moved with compassion? Why was he willing, why was he so burdened that he actually stopped? He looked at these people, they were hungry, and he said they're like a sheep without a shepherd. They have no direction, and it bothered him. And he uses this word, compassion. And he said, we need laborers because the harvest is plentiful. And God's heart's moved. We got to ask our question like, why is not our heart moved? A church can only function as a body that works together. It can only function the way it's supposed to function when the people that go to the church believe in the mission. And what's the mission? The mission is to spread the gospel. And there are all kinds of avenues in which to do that. One of the avenues that he used right there when he saw them being hungry, he fed them. And he would meet some of their physical needs. Can you imagine the time afterwards, when I was on that last trip, it really kind of made me a little bit uncomfortable because they would bring these people here. And it must be something with the environment in Pakistan, because it didn't happen to me one time. It happened to me, I did. Good luck with that, right? I can't remember not to do that. So, when I was there, they, several, I bet you at least 15 ladies and couples would come to me and say, after you get done preaching, so the preacher's done preaching, they would come up to you and they would say, please pray for my son. He has this medical condition. These old ladies would come up, sweet old ladies would come up and say, I hurt right here. Would you pray for me? And I'm thinking, I can't do anything. Right? I'm not Jesus. I wish I could do that, but I can't. I can ask him. I can believe he'll do it. You know what's very sad? Couple after couple. And like I said, I think it's something to do with the environment in Pakistan. Young ladies saying, I've been married 8 years and we can't have children. It happened so much that you stopped and you could remember that, man, there must be something going on in Pakistan that happened too many times. I told the pastor, Oh, well, just pray that don't get me in trouble, because I can't. I'm not going to be able to not do that. So I thought, man, there must be something going on here. And they would literally come in front of you, and I thought, Lord, please, please don't leave these guys with this impression that I've got that kind of power to fix this myself, because I don't. I'll tell you this and I'm done. Last Sunday, Gabe and I went down to the jail. And we did our little rounds. Actually, we went to one pod, preached, and we're like, well, we spent quite a bit in there. We're like, all right, let's go ahead and go. We got out, and the ladies are still talking back in their pod, and they're like, man, Sandy's going all night in here, right? So we're like, okay, well, we'll go to another pod. So we go to another pod, and we go to leave, and the guard says, hold on, you can't go through right now. They were moving somebody that couldn't be around people. And then they said, and there's somebody we want you to personally go see, because he's really troubled and he's scared and he has issues. Will you go pray with him? And Gabe, you want to tell him what you saw in there?
Yeah, that was the most beautiful thing I ever seen. There's a guy in there. He was in there when I was there. They got him off his cell. What, 4 by 7 was in there for almost 2 years by himself. He looked at it. He can't read or write. He's never read his Bible. He looked at it. He says, I don't mind being in jail. He says, the demons in my head. Tell me to kill myself, hurt myself all the time. Well, I can't stand it. He says, I'm fine with jail.
And Gabe and I said the same thing when we walked out of that room. You felt his pain. And Arnold, he asked me to pray that those voices in his head would quit. I told Gabe, I said, I wish Jesus was here. I can't do that. He actually had a picture book about Jesus on the cross because he couldn't read. And he says, but I look at the pictures. He's the kindest, gentlest man. And he did say, I'm not really afraid to be in jail. He said, but the voices, I can't take the voices. Well, how could you not stand there and just feel for that guy? And that's what Jesus said. And then he said, okay, Dave, problem's big. I need people to go. But it's got to be a volunteer army. Because all that live godly shall suffer persecution, and it's not an easy journey. However, and if you're going to get something done, it's very difficult. It's very difficult when you think about direction. You think about a church and the direction of a church. Well, you got to be on board with the mission. And what's the mission? Go into all the world and preach the gospel. That's the mission. Locally, and wherever there's a door that he lets you go through. This is what you do, right? But you got to believe in it. Well, when you're standing there like this with a God that's, kind person. And he's right. I looked at that there in that little room. That mattress was that thick, no joke. It's just on the cement. There's no bed frame or anything like that in there. Did you see a toilet in there? But it's like, if there was, it's like right in the middle of everything else. No window. Little slit in the door. And he's in that room day in and day. Now look, I'm sure, what he said? He says, I get out. He says, I do good for a little bit. And he says, then the voices, I honestly can't help to think that maybe the guy's demon possessed, but Jason, I'm thinking, I don't think I have what it takes to be able to cast out a demon. Would I even be bold enough to even try that? I do believe that's still out there. I believe that stuff's real. You come out of there and you don't care, something's wrong. Something is wrong, right? Gabe told me the next day, he said, woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Why? The same reason why Jesus looked out and said, he had compassion. So, that plea is still out there. He said, pray for laborers. Or maybe tonight what we can do is say, before I go home, if there's anything I can do for you, doesn't matter what. Have you ever said that to somebody before? I've heard people in this room say that to somebody else they care about. I've seen it in a funeral line before. Somebody will reach over to somebody else and say, listen, whatever you need, it doesn't matter what time, you let me know, I'll be there. Ever heard other people say that? Well, why couldn't we go to the Lord tonight and say, listen, before now and the time I go home, you know my abilities, anything you need. Any way that I can help. In fact, I've said it to people before because I know there's so much deep family here. And I know like Miss Brenda, she'll be sick, and I know she's got sons all over the place. She'll need me. But you still feel like you want to do something. And I've told her, listen, just call me. We'll drop what I'm doing. Well, they got all those boys helping. But it'd be okay to go to God and tell him that same thing tonight. And saying, I believe in your mission. And I'm thankful that that mission reached me. And because of that, could you do me a favor? Would you please write my name down on that volunteer list? And you need me. You just tap my heart. And I'll be there for you. Whatever, whenever. And I think that's what the Bible calls is our reasonable service. That would be reasonable to volunteer. Now, he may only need 300 of them, but I won't be on that list. And I don't want to get cut for the wrong reason. I don't want to get cut because, I'm afraid or my heart's not in it. I want to be that willing person that says, whatever you need, I'll be involved. Because, I thought about, do I preach this message on Sunday morning or do I preach this message on Sunday night? Do I do it on Wednesday night? Sunday night, you're definitely preaching to the choir. But you know what you got? Well, you're not here. You wouldn't be here if you didn't want to be. It's a good place to start when you're seeking recruits, right? Amen. That's a good place to start right there because it's Sunday night. You wouldn't be here if you didn't want to be here. And it's a privilege to do something for the Lord. Maybe perhaps there's something out there that he has for you to do tonight. Brother Whalen, will you close us in prayer?